So here we are back in the games room, and I thought I'd do something a little bit different this time. Rather than talking about all these great games, I thought I'd actually talk about some of the not so great games or disappointing games. Either they were disappointing for personal reasons, I was expecting more, or they were just generally bad games. I actually picked up a couple of PCBs recently, and they weren't quite what I expected. They weren't great, to say the least, so I got a little bit of inspiration to this video. I didn't really want to do a pickups video for them, so I thought, why not do this disappointing games list and include the games in the video that way. Of course, I've got no one to blame but myself for some of these disappointing games. You can always do more research to know exactly what you're getting into, but sometimes it's nice for nostalgia just to take over and just have a little bit of fun, having a bit of a gamble on some of these games. And there's also this little bit of an arcade bias that I find myself as well. So even if a port was really terrible, I always think it can't be bad on the arcade, right? There's no such thing as a bad arcade game, but believe me, there are bad arcade games, and some from really good developers too. So let's have a look at some of the disappointing arcade games I've collected over the years. Let's start off with the mighty Neo Geo and Fight Fever. This is actually a game I did cover in past pickups videos, back when I was doing the full MVS collection, and I like the game so much, it is back again. If you're thinking what possibly could go wrong with this one, a 4-button fighting game on the Neo Geo with beautiful big sprites, well, you would have fallen in the same trap as I did. First thing you'll notice is the truly uninspiring, boring characters to choose from. Got your standard sort of stereotypes in there, but nothing interesting. Even ChatGPT would struggle to make something so bland and generic. Then you got the actual gameplay itself. While it's not completely broken, it just feels a little bit sluggish, and the moves are again a bit boring. You'll find 1 or 2 moves per character that you'll keep on spamming the opponent, and that will take you to the end level boss. So it was just disappointing for me to find such a poor and bland game on the Neo Geo, especially a fighter. And to top it up, to rub salt in the wound, this one's not an easy one to find. So it was over $200, so it was a little bit painful to swallow that pill. Staying with the Neo Geo, we have got Legend of Success Joe. This, of course, is again based on the manga series, and it was one of the very early Neo Geo games, around 91, but that's no excuse for this to be a giant steaming heap of a turd of a game. I remember seeing screenshots back in the day and thinking, okay, it's not the greatest looking game in the world, but come on, you've got boxing and brawling on the Neo Geo, it's gotta be fun, right? How I was deceived. It completely fails as a boxing game due to its lack of depth and its sluggish, unresponsive controls ensure there's no chance anyone's going to enjoy this as a brawler. The boxing part is probably a little bit better due to the fact that it just feels a little bit more fair, but once you finish your match, if you get through and win, then it's back to the brawling again and back to those controls and cheap hits. The game had to be on the list, not just the fact that it's a bad game, but just that sheer disappointment that I faced after years of seeing this as a kid, those screenshots, and then finally getting to play this game. This was a Japanese exclusive, so the rest of the world actually dodged a bullet for this one, but unfortunately that means it's not an easy one to track down, so idiots like me collecting the full MVS sets, you had to pay a little bit for this one, so that's more salt in the wound. Yeah, you could say this game is a bit of a legend, but success-wise, the only successful thing it's done is irritate the crap out of me. Next up, we got a bit of Taito, and it's Kageki. Normally when I'm making these videos, I really enjoy playing the games and capturing the footage, but in this case, I was really dreading playing this one, as you can probably see from the minimal effort sort of footage I've captured. 1988 might not have been Taito's best year, but they did bring out some great games in the arcade, like New Zealand Story or Chase HQ. They even published Tatsujin, so there's no excuses here. For me, this stands for everything that's not Taito. It's ugly, it's boring, everything you just don't associate with Taito arcade games. Yes, I was aware there was a Mega Drive version, but I never thought for 1 second that it was going to be as bad as this. This game had to be on the list. I even resent the fact that I had to pull out a decent game for my bird setup just to play this and capture the footage. Absolute awful game. Okay, let's mix things up a little bit, include one of my favorite developers of all time, Towerplan. Yes, they actually made some bad games. There's actually another one that nearly made the list. Maybe that will be in a separate video. This, of course, is Snow Bros 2 with new elves, and they actually published it under another name, Hannah Fram, maybe to distance themselves from this one. I don't know what happened, maybe because of bankruptcy. I think at this point they actually fired all their artists, and that's why this game is so damn hideous. After picking up the PCB for Snow Bros and absolutely adoring it, I soon seeked the sequel, and yes, I was greeted by these wonderful graphics, and I thought they were just taking the piss. There's probably many people out there saying, yeah, it's not a bad game, and you'd be right, it's not that bad, but it's no way as good as the original, and just the sheer fact, the pure ugly graphics they put into it, it was just, at the time, it was shocking and disappointing to me. What can I say? If it was a bad publisher or bad developer, I would understand, but it's not, it's Towerplan, so I'm disappointed. Next, I'm even including a game in one of my favorite series of all time. It's Samurai Showdown 64-2 Warrior's Rage. Again, this is not technically a terrible game. While it's not great, it's not terrible. So this is another one that's my personal disappointment, and this one goes back all the way to about 2007 when I first got my Super Gun and I was picking up MVS games. It was an incredible time for me, experienced some of these games for the very first time. I only played a couple of MVS games in the arcade, things like Samurai Showdown 4 I had never played before, and I was having an amazing experience playing SNK games. Then I was sniffing around on eBay looking for PCBs, and I saw this Neo Geo 64 motherboard, brand new, 3 games. I'm thinking, I've got to give this one a go. It's only like £100, no one cared about them in those days. So yes, I picked it up, plugged it in, and that's when the disappointment started. As you can imagine, since I've not even heard of a Neo Geo 64, not even seen much stuff online about it, just a couple of screenshots and stuff, I was expecting so much from these little dustbin lid games. I just felt so disappointed that they were at the pinnacle with these 2D games, and they just went backwards for the sake of using 3D. Don't get me wrong, I fully understand the need to be progressive, and these games did have to come out in order to get to where we are now, but at the time I was just so disappointed, and at least they did go to Samurai Showdown 6 with back to their beautiful 2D graphics. Next up is the Naomi, and we've got Jingy Storm, the arcade. This complete disaster of a fighting game is an arcade exclusive, I think also exclusive to Japan, and it's got quite a strange little backstory to it. So it's actually a reskin of a Thomas Wave game that wasn't released, and that game was called Force 5. Attractiva obviously didn't think there was too much wrong with the original game. They just basically took it and reskinned it with some slightly sexier characters and added some naughty little cutscenes as well. And yeah, it was still a crap game. So why am I so disappointed with this one? Well, it's kind of a similar story to the Samurai 64 one. So back in the day, I really focused my collecting on arcade games rather than home consoles. So I focused on things like Naomi and also Thomas Wave. And I really was getting into my fighters, and I was discovering a lot of fighters, things like Melty Blood and Guilty Gear. Yes, I know they came out on the PS2 and things like that, but I discovered and played them first on the Naomi. Even stuff like Akatsuki Denko Senkai as well that didn't get a home port. So I associated these amazing fighting games with the Naomi. So you can imagine once I loaded this GD-ROM up, you know, it's pre-NetBoot days, I was extremely disappointed to say the least. Next up, we've got an extremely dusty and dirty RM board. It's Gun Force. This is another one I remember seeing screenshots as a kid and being absolutely blown away by the graphics and the excitement of having a sort of contra game with vehicles and helicopters. It absolutely blew my mind. After that, I completely lost track of the game, completely forgot about it, never saw it in the arcades, didn't even know about the Super Nintendo version that came out, otherwise I would have been warned. So I didn't see it until much later when I was looking for PCBs and saw this for sale, and those flashbacks came back. The excitement of wanting to play this game all flooded back, and I had to get that PCB. So it wasn't too expensive at the time, it was about 150, but still you could get pretty good PCBs at that time. After all that excitement, I finally got to play the game, and I was so damn disappointed with the floating mechanics. It's just not a good game. But there is a silver lining to this story, as this game will be converted. It will be a donor to a multi, so I'll be able to play much better games on it. Next up, we got our first entry from Technos, and it is Chinate. So this was actually a bit of a blind buy on Yahoo Auctions. It's actually from a seller that seemed to be selling off his collection, and he had them as untested. So I actually picked up a couple of games, amazing games for him. Bit of a gamble, but they were low priced because untested, and they all worked fine. So I thought to myself, if I see any games from him, I'm going to check them out, and the chances are I'm going to get them on the cheap. So the only things that I knew about this when it came up was the fact that it was obviously a Technos game, and that it was based on the sort of Monkey series. So I was thinking Double Dragon meets Monkey, I am in. And I wasn't too far wrong with that. I mean, it is kind of like that, but it's a little bit basic, and it's pretty damn ugly too. My only big disappointment with this game is it could have been a hell of a lot better. It could have been so much more. The gameplay wise, it's actually not too bad. It's kind of playable and enjoyable in that sense, but it's just too basic and simple. You're just going to get to the top of the tower. And of course, graphically, it's just a complete mess. It could have been one hell of a game. It could have been really, really fun multiplayer. Next up, we have a game distributed by Capcom, and it's actually our second Korean game on the list after Fight Fever. And the reason why I say distributed is because the fact that I got tricked by that little Capcom label. To me, that Capcom little logo was a seal of quality for arcade games. I have no idea why they touched this one. Maybe the Koreans had some dirt on them or something like that to force them to help push this game in the States. I think in this particular case, I don't really need to explain my disappointment in this game. I think it's kind of clear from the actual gameplay footage. Of course, it's a complete rip-off, and a very bad one of that too, of Rolling Thunder. The game does include some classic key elements that make it an absolute shit game, including some fantastic floaty jump mechanics, and of course reuse those resources as much as you can, just slightly change the colour, and why not do a bit of door materialization when you just can't be asked to do the animation. Before we move on to the last couple of games, I'll quickly show the introduction scene, which is absolutely epic. If only they just pulled out the guns and wasted the enemies, the whole game could have been avoided. Next deities are going to join the list with Death Braid or Mutant Fighter. So this is one of the games I picked up recently, so it's one of the reasons or inspirations to actually do this list of disappointment in the first place. And it was a cheeky bid on Yahoo Auctions, put a low bid on, and there was no activity because no one wanted it, and no one wanted it for a very good reason. So what's my excuse this time to actually put a bid on such atrocity? Well, I got completely thrown by the name. So yes, if it was called Mutant Fighter, I would have realised what game it was. I would have remembered from the ports and realised, yeah, this ain't a game I want to be bidding on. But no, I saw the picture with the dragon, the guy standing there with a sword, and saw Death Braid, and I got confused. I thought it was something like Dark Seal, so I thought it was a brawler. So I'm getting excited, thinking to myself, got a cool little brawler from Data East, maybe a medieval sort of Captain America and Avengers, but no, It's a wrestling game and I freaking hate wrestling games. Okay, maybe for wrestling fans they might like this one, but for me, it's pure disappointment. I've saved the best for last and the true inspiration to this video. Double Dragon 3, the Rosetta Stone. This time round, I got no excuses. I knew what the game was called. I knew what type of game it was. I thought I got myself a little bit of Techno's Gold, one of the Double Dragon series. No, it wasn't too expensive. I was really happy with my purchase. Yes, I know the NES version was terrible, but this is where the arcade sort of bias came into play. I'm thinking this is a 1990s arcade game. We've got some good hardware. They've learned from 1 or 2. This is going to be a cracking version. Literally moments after being disappointed by the offerings of Death Braid, I get to experience Double Dragon 3 for the first time. And what an experience it was too. I was in absolute awe of the dedication and talent it must have taken to make a game this poor that could make the NES version look like Final Fight. I just don't understand how a game of this franchise could get through quality control with such poor controls, floaty mechanics, and just some ugly sprite animation as well. They just look ridiculous. The only way this game could be made any worse is if they put microtransactions in it. And guess what? This is the Japanese version, so it doesn't have it, but the American version did have microtransactions. It's one of the first games that introduced it, so you could buy extra power-ups and I think extra moves as well you could buy with it as well. So I don't even have the worst version of the game. So there you have it. Those are the 11 disappointing arcade games in my collection, and quite a lot of recurring themes in there, mostly my own stupidity. So always do your research if you don't want to be disappointed. But one thing I want to quickly point out is just because a PCB is cheap, it doesn't mean it's going to turn out a dud. There are some amazing PCBs out there that don't demand a high price. Something like Flying Shot, amazing toe blind shooter, still doesn't cost much to get, and it's one of the greatest shooters you can get too. For those who made it to the end of the video, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Hope you guys got something out of the video. That's why I make these videos. Hopefully there's either a game there that you saw that's so bad you want to check out, or maybe you were going to get a game and now I've changed your mind. But anyway, take it easy. Laters.